a quest to unravel the mysteries of existence. Every episode, we ask the fundamental question, what is consciousness? Is consciousness merely a product of our brains, or does it connect us to something greater? Explore the very fabric of our thoughts. Don't miss a moment. Expand your awareness and tap into the boundless potential that resides within you. Welcome to the live stream of consciousness.
Yes, welcome to the live stream of consciousness. Most of you guys know this is my favorite place to be. This is my one moment during the week that I get to really focus my intention on being here, being with you guys, talking to my guest, having a great conversation, and just feeling the moment and feeling like accomplished, like I've committed to something and I've done it and I'm here. Again, it's Thursday, June 27th. We have been doing this for probably about 3 years now. Oh my God. And it's just amazing. It has changed me in so many ways. It's introduced me to so many of you people out there. So let me just say hello to Ninja Kitty. And I see, oh, Al Hurnyak is out there. I wonder where he came from. Awesome. Very cool. Welcome, Al, to the live stream of consciousness. If you are just coming across this for the first time, like I said, it's my favorite place. You're welcome to have it be your favorite place too. And subscribe and like and maybe even make a comment. If you don't know what to comment, just put a question mark, because that question mark will increase the algorithm and grow the community and allow me to reach more people. And that's what I'm trying to do, because it just feels good to get the feedback that I'm making sense to somebody, because sometimes you just don't know if you're making sense or not. So like I said, it's Thursday, it's June 27th. I know earlier this year we took our powers and we slowed down time, right? The beginning of the year was going nice and slow each week. It was nice and slow. And then all of a sudden it started speeding up again. It's summertime. It's the end of June. I'm trying to willfully slow everything down so I can enjoy summer. So concentrate on that with me. And let's slow down. Yes, we have. And it's great. I mean, we still got half a year left. So I'm excited. So tonight's guest is somebody I'm excited to talk to. It's interesting. I was kind of doing some research about the Long Island Creative Vortex, which is I don't know if you would call it an organization. I guess it's an organization that Eric created. And I looked and I noticed that I had actually posted over the last couple of years on that page and kind of been a part of the Creative Vortex. It's just such a intriguing and inviting name for people who are creative in any way: musicians, artists, writers, artisans, craftspeople, who make stuff for a living. That's an art form. So I was happy to see that I was actually kind of already in that vortex with Eric. And as I got to know Eric over the week, in the last couple of weeks, I was really inspired by his story. So I'm excited to share it with you guys. And so without further ado, I guess, is it 3 minutes, 4 minutes yet of babbling? I'm going to welcome to the show, the live stream of consciousness, welcoming Eric Hurnyak. What's up, Eric?
Hey, what's going on?
How you doing, my friend?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. I'm excited to actually talk to you face to face rather than over chat and give you an opportunity to share the story of the Long Island Creative Vortex. I think it's amazing. And I also love how it brought you to where you are today, which we're going to get to the 360 ride, Bab's 360 ride.
Yeah.
But I want to welcome you to the live stream and present you with the first test. No, it's not really a test, but it's just a question I like to get started with, because I love the conversations about what we are, what we're made of, why we're here, that kind of thing. So the question is, what is consciousness?
To me, consciousness comes down to intention and living a life of intention. There's so many times that we just kind of cruise through life. When we drive, that's a great example. There's been plenty of times that I've just jumped in the car, thrown on, something on the radio, and a half an hour later, I'm at my destination and I have no idea what happened in between point A and point B. Mm-hmm. And So consciousness to me comes down to paying attention to what's going on in between. And it's one of these things that seems so simple, and yet it is incredibly hard to master, because your brain is constantly pulling you away. There's so many conversations going on in your mind. I'm creative, so I'm constantly writing stories,
Right.
that haven't happened. And, learning how to grab those moments and look at them as beacons to pull yourself back into the moment. Right now seems to be the total challenge, and something I'm working on and definitely haven't mastered,
Right. Well, I think that's the thing. It's always a work in progress, right? I think, if you master it, then what? That's it. You're done.
Exactly.
Right? So, it's good that you haven't mastered it, I think. And I actually love what you said there. It's interesting. You said your brain kind of pulls you away from consciousness by having all of these thoughts. That's a really interesting viewpoint, and I totally get it, and I agree with you. So consciousness is really kind of underlying that, but consciousness is the intention of focusing on that consciousness, not just, like you said, automatically doing your routine, going to work, or all of a sudden you're like, oh wow, I just got through the day, I don't even remember what happened.
Well, and like being in the moment, there's two different sides to being in your moment. There's the side that is all about instant gratification and about getting the easy fix. And that is in the moment. That's giving into the thought, the first emotion, the first base. That is being in the moment, as much as working towards the higher purpose and your higher self. And that's the game. The game is to really shoot for the long game instead of the short term instant gratification. And dude, for like the first 20 years of my life, instant gratification was my game,
Sure.
But,
Yeah.
as I've gotten older, it just, it'll kill you,
Yeah. There's definitely certain things about instant gratification that are kind of negative, that it's like, okay, you took the easy road just to get that little dopamine hit, and now what, right? And then there's the idea of kind of having a more long-term goal and being intentional with what you're doing and saying, okay, if I do this now, I'm not going to get that reward tomorrow, but in 10 days when the project's finished, I'll get that reward and it'll be that much better of a reward.
100%.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see the quiet healer out there. What's up, quiet healer? Welcome.
Have you ever had this experience in different projects that I was doing early on? I would do, these projects. I would work weeks to get a project done. Project would come, project would end. I'd go back to work on Monday, and it was like nothing happened. And I would feel no reward from that. And that was a big wake-up call to be more conscious, because that I started to realize, okay, what am I looking for, out of these projects? Because if it's the slow steps forward and the ones that go to the higher purpose or the long game, that's one thing. But if I'm looking for, something that's like ego pointing, that's where I always end up falling short.
Right.
Have you found that in your life too?
Yeah, absolutely. So if I'm getting this right, kind of the idea of being in the project and being like you're excited because, ooh, this project, I'm in it, I'm working on it, and then when it's done, you're like, oh, now I'm not. That's not a moment for me anymore. I can't be in the project. It's already done.
Now what?
I got to move on to the next thing. And I agree with you. And I think we do need to relish that and be more aware of, like, the art is in the process, right? The art isn't like necessarily the end product. It's the process of creation and creating it and being in that moment, like we're talking about, being in the moment. And I think that has a lot to do with what we're going to talk about with the Long Island Creative Vortex, and how that came about. I think everything we're talking about, kind of, from the story that I heard, and I can't wait for you to tell it here, is about that, finding that flow in the moment. But I want to ask you something else before we move on to that.
Sure.
And I'm not really sure, I know you're a spiritual person from our talks. I know, you're kind of a bit, your belief in the soul and energy and the infinite part of us.
Mhm.
But I'm not sure about your feelings about kind of like the supernatural or other metaphysical practices. If you subscribe to those things, which I'm hoping you do, and I'm thinking that you do, uh, is there a moment that you can remember being like, okay, maybe there's a little bit more to the world than what I'm being taught in school, and kind of my day-to-day living, there's other things that exist?
So where I'm seeing that really comes down to touching intuition more than anything else. And the reason why I say that is I journal a lot, and that's how I kind of work through everything. And I really search for the intuitive voice to kind of guide me. And when I'm able to like throw it down in front of me, I get results that are pretty solid. And the thing is that there have been these conclusions that I've come to, where like I'll pick up a book or I'll talk to somebody else, or other people seem to come up with the same definitions of the truth, with just different ways, but all on the same footing. And to me, that's like a connectiveness that you can't deny. That's what points, to something bigger. As far as things that I can't put my finger on, obviously, with what we're going to talk about later, like death has been a big part of my discussion. And, like my experiences, like when my friends are dead, they're gone, and, whatever lives inside of me, whether it's memory or, a voice that I need to hear, like, like my imagination takes on, a character. That's one thing. I can't definitively say what that is or isn't, but I can definitely say with no doubt that we all seem to deeply know some sort of objective truth, that we all can't really deny on some level. And it's just that to me points to the infinite.
Gotcha. Awesome. So you haven't really had an experience, let's say, with a friend that's passed away where you feel like you've experienced their energy again, other than in your memory, or is that where you say that's how you experience it in your memory, that their energy is a part of you?
I mean, I've never had like, any kind of like a supernatural moment with like a family member or something like that. I did have a dream recently that was pretty interesting, where my grandmother came to me. And that was some serious closure. But for me, like, I could kind of subconscious my way around that. You know what I mean?
Right.
But like I said, the one place where, I find energy that makes sense, like, Stephen Pressfield. Right now, like I had to go by the War of Art again, because it's just one of the most influential, easy reads. It's like your grandfather just sitting down and just being like, just stop, just do it. You're resisting and you have to get past that resistance. And, it was like, I remember reading his take on resistance, and I had already come to that conclusion in my own life, and to like, to have those moments where somebody like touches the same thing, and you just have this like aha, and it kind of gets you, a little. I get nervous about saying excited, because the highs and lows, aren't somewhere to put your energy. But when you see something that resonates, it's worth looking into and considering.
Yeah, no, that's a great word. Yeah, that's it. It's vibrating, and you're like, I recognize that vibration. That makes sense to me. That feels right. That's what resonates. Yeah, no, that's and that's great. And that's kind of what I love about my perspective on it, is that It doesn't have to be defined as, oh, my grandmother visited me, right? Like you're saying, oh, you can subconscious your way around that, right? Like, so that
Right.
that was in your mind, your memories, bringing back to you an experience to give you that closure or whatever it might be. You may not necessarily look at it as like, oh, my grandmother's energy was coming back to me, but you are looking at it like it's all the same thing, right? It's
Yeah, and I would never take anything away from anybody who has had those moments.
right,
I just haven't experienced them, you know.
right, right. And that,
You know,
yeah, that's great, and that's fine. I feel like you have, but you're struggling to define it that way. But that's okay, because that's me, and you have to define it the way you experienced it,
well,
right?
the older, listen, the older I get, the more I realize that the way that I'm making sense of everything in the universe right now totally doesn't apply tomorrow. Like it could all not work tomorrow, and then I got to figure something out. And you know, the name of the game is being able to let go of what you think you know,
Right,
you know, so that you can grab onto the next thing.
right.
So yeah, you know,
And that, I think that's super significant on June 27th, 2024. Right now, this moment that we're living in the world, it's like you don't know what's going to be when you wake up tomorrow, like what reality will be. It might be something completely different.
100%.
Yeah, which and I think that in itself is kind of the point, right? Just to be like, okay, I can say that out loud and not necessarily experience it, but or it could be tomorrow. It could be.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of this day and age, I mean, it is so easy to get pulled away from being conscious, and now it's more important than ever. There are so many things that are being monetized, you know, like your rage, your fear, it's constantly being monetized and thrown all over the place, and it's all over social media, it's all over the news. You can't even have a storm without it having some, like, you know, like weather dome, you know, or like, you know, bomb cyclone. Oh, I'm scared, you know what I mean? And then they sell you like, you know, 100 different pharmaceuticals. None of this has anything to do with anything you have control over. And over the last year and a half, 2 years, like that is screaming at me, like what really, really matters.
Right.
And sometimes when you see these things and you start to get that anger, you know, or whatever, you know what I mean? It's time to like look at that and be like,
Right.
It's time for me to really kind of pay attention and see what's going on. Like that movie, Look Up, you know what I mean?
Totally. So, and that's great. I'm excited to get to what you are doing now, because exactly like you said, you're transforming that energy and doubt and fear and all of those things into love and into a positive thing and into kind of a force that is keeping you moving forward, which I think is really super inspiring. But before we get to that, let's start at the beginning. Let's start at the spiritual journey that brought you to the Long Island Creative Vortex. Can you bring me to that? What started that?
So, I mean, I'll go a little bit deeper. I've been an artist ever since, you know, I can remember. You know, it wasn't an option. It was, and this is what you are, and this is what you'll do. And you know, I fell in love with skateboarding when I was, you know, 14, and it wasn't because of the tricks. It was because of the graphics. Like, you know, I saw the undersides of the boards and I was like, that's awesome. It was like between that and like Iron Maiden posters, which, you know, I was like, this is so cool. I want to learn how to do this. And, you know, so over the years, I developed my own style, you know, and I was using my tools. You know, I was smoking a lot of weed, and you know, looking for something that way. And I think once I had gotten into my 30s or so, I tried to get together like a collective, which I called Alternative Arts of Long Island. And we threw together like a website. This was like maybe 2008, 2009. And we threw together a website where we were trying to find artists on Long Island that were different. You know, there was plenty of people doing lighthouses and seascapes and shells and all that kind of stuff. And I was looking for Long Island artists that had something unique to offer, right? And it was pretty cool. We had like a nice little thing going on. And through that, I created, I put a post together about creating a kind of like a multimedia type of a thing. you know, with like, I wanted to incorporate music and I wanted to incorporate art. And the whole point, as far as I'm concerned, was I was trying to create, like, I couldn't figure out where my artwork fit. So if I could like create, you know, like my own universe and then kind of insert it in there, you know, like,
Right.
that's what I was really looking to do. So I put a call out. A couple of artists came back. It was a guitarist that I'd been friends with a long time and a DJ named Dex Orphan. And the three of us created this like completely improv band called Illuminati Murdoch. And
Illuminati Murdoch?
Yeah.
Right.
It was like, it was all improv, and it was the craziest stuff. You know, like Brian is like kind of the Jimmy Page school of playing. Okay. I come from like the New Order, Cure kind of playing, and Dex is just crazy, you know, as a DJ. But the three of us like threw down in my boiler room for like 3 years, and we were like playing the Funky Fish, just like we didn't have a song. You know what I mean?
Wow. Yeah.
And we were just constantly edging, you know, just absolutely hitting the wall every time we went out. You know, it was like, this could be a really good show or it could be horrible, but
right.
But it was amazing. And it was like this amazing journey that was happening. But I was definitely in a very destructive place personally to get there.
Gotcha.
And it kind of, you know, and I felt like I was spinning my wheels with my art, with my music, with my life, and just a number of things started to happen. I remember I was also working in home improvements, and I always used to draw all over my glance of the day, and people would come in all the time, and they're like, "What are you doing here?" You know, and I was like, "Whatever, life. This is where life brought me, and I'm just here along for the ride." Right. And it was like in between that and feeling like I wasn't doing anything of purpose with everything else, I just started searching. And originally I started searching like when I was supposed to be at work. I would be like, hey, let me, you know, type up and search spirituality. And I went through like a phase where like, you know, I was reading a little bit of everything, you know, from like the Rastafarians to you know, like Eastern philosophy, and that just kept coming back. And this was 2010, 2011. And a couple things happened. First, I found a book called Conversations with God, which was a really, really challenging, interesting take on a relationship with God and how God can communicate, right? I took it as somebody having an intuitive discussion, but I also view intuition as like the Holy Spirit. But this was at the beginning of that journey, you know? So like, I remember like hearing that along with, I kept reading about, you know, like a lot of Buddhist, like the Eightfold Path, you know, the Four Noble Truths, stuff like that was really starting to make sense to me. And I just had this like moment, like this mountaintop moment where I was able to like give up in an instant, like all the stuff that was hurting me. And at the time, like the band that I was in had fallen apart. Stuff that I was working towards, just it was a good time to kind of scrap it all and start from scratch.
Okay.
So at the time, this is right after the financial crisis and stuff, and where I was working, things were getting very difficult. And I was involved in purchasing. And I remember we were just locked up with everybody, and I just quit smoking. So that would be how I would deal with it. I'd go outside and have a cigarette, and now that wasn't an option. So I took a walk, and I ended up in this industrial park across the street from where I was working, and there was a sign shop there. And I walked in, and I saw the guy behind the counter, and I said, "Hey, are you hiring?" And he was like, "No." I was like, "Cool." And then I was gonna like leave, and he was like, "Why?" I said, "Well, I'm an artist. I'm looking to find a career where I can utilize what I do, and I just saw your sign, and I had to walk in." And he's like, "Hold on," and he brought his partner in, and the partner and I just like hit it off immediately. And he was like, look, man, it sounds like you followed your heart in here. Let's give it a shot. Why don't you come in here later on tonight, give it a couple hours and see what you think. And I came back in, and I worked with them that night, and I just fell in love with it. And the next night I came in, and they completely threw me to the wolves. Like the two of them were like, here's a 16-foot sign, bye, and they left.
Yeah.
And but I got it, and I remember I climbed up a ladder and I took a picture of it and I sent it to my father, and I was like so proud of myself, you know what I mean? Which I hadn't ever gotten out of a job,
Right.
oh, I ordered a bunch of storm doors,
Right.
never gonna have that moment doing that kind of stuff. And
Right.
I remember I went into work the next day, and my boss looked at me and he was like, see if that sign company can hire you full time, because we're done. We're going out of business. And that was it. And so I walked back over there, told them what the deal was, and we tried to make it work for, about 3 or 4 months. And I just said, I'm like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm like, within 5 years, I'm going to own my own business doing signs. I knew that was part of the plan, and that was it.
Yeah.
And one of the coolest parts about being at that place is we would sit down in the morning, the three of us, and we would do like this triangle where the three of us would just kind of like throw our ideas back and forth at each other. And it was such a cool feeling, because it's like you felt like you were one of 3 points that mattered on how the day was going to go.
Right.
And through that kind of discussion, I was like, I started to think about what I could do creatively on my own time. And, it was also my wife at the time was working in Florida on the weekends and stuff. So it was just me, and my daughter was like 7. And there were a lot of nights where I didn't know what to do with myself. I wasn't in a band anymore. I wasn't doing anything destructive or creative, but I knew something had to happen. So I just started making phone calls, and I'm like, God, to everyone I knew. And I'm like, why don't you come on over and let's see if we can do like kind of a jam session with like art and music and just discussion. And let's just see what happens. And so first night, like 15 people showed up, and we had like an area in my boiler room set up for jamming. I had a bunch of couches and tables for, just people to kind of chill out and talk. And I set up this giant canvas on the side of my wall and just pulled out all my, paints and stuff like that, and just put them out there. And that first night, what happened was, a bunch of artists just started painting together, and which was a really interesting thing to be a part of and to watch, because it doesn't usually happen.
Right.
Every time that I've ever drawn, it's just me and the canvas, and that's it. But now there's like, somebody like right on top of you that's like working off what you're doing, and then they're showing you little tricks and stuff that they're doing, and you're having a conversation on the canvas, which was really cool. And at the same time, the conversation that's going on over our shoulder on the couch is influencing what's going on the canvas, and the music that's going on this side is influencing what's going on the canvas in the discussion. And everything just started, kind of working around itself. And that's where the name Vortex came from.
Yeah. Let me stop you there for a second, because I want to kind of break this down, because this is what I found really inspiring, right? Was just the ability to even kind of notice what was happening and notice how it was happening and what it even meant, right? So the idea, I mean, I'm an artist, I'm a musician, I understand both of those ways of expressing myself, and kind of like you said, when you're playing in a band, it's a collective, there's a collaboration happening, and there's nothing like that, right? It's like a dance, it's like a conversation, it's like 100%. It's so much like being in the flow. And I'm so glad now, being older and saying, wow, when I was in my 20s, I was channeling, I didn't even know it, right? And that's music, but the idea that you had to say, hey, what if some visual artists would do this together? What would that even look like? What would that be like? And without any rules or expectations, you just did it. And this result that you got is amazing. You did tell me when we had a conversation earlier this week that there was one rule, and that was like there were no rules. You can paint over something if you want to paint on top of something. So it was like not out of disrespect, but almost out of collaboration. Like a bass player would play something and a guitar player would play something over that, and they would become something. The two would become one.
Exactly. This was a full-on jam session.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And that, jamming has always been such an important part of everything I do, because the flow state is something that I definitely was able to like click onto pretty early in life. I just didn't know what it meant.
Right.
So now we were adding new dimensions to what that looked like. And it was super interesting. And it was like, there was one artist, Michelle, who opened up Studio E here, and she was really like the person who was kind of like the cheerleader to get people to get up and start drawing together. And she just had this energy. Her and her husband Stelios would just throw on the canvas, and just they had a great energy towards them because it would just pull you into it.
Totally.
And I remember waking up the next morning and just feeling like $1,000,000, and I had never felt that way before ever. And I was like, we have to do this again. And so I created a group on Facebook called the Long Island Creative Vortex. I just came up with that name. And
pop that up here.
Like I said, back in 2012, that was like an important thing, and it worked. And it was a way for me to kind of create the barrel to shoot the fish in. Like every Friday I would throw out, I'd create like, an event, and people would come over to the house, and we were just doing this in the basement for about a year. And then I wanted the group also to be a space where each individual artist could also promote what they were doing, whether it was different shows or different ideas that they wanted to express. I wanted that to be kind of, I wanted it to be a collective. And originally I made everybody like an admin to the group.
Right.
And, there was definitely a lot of figuring things out, but it really worked out really cool for that first year. So
are these pictures from the first one that I had brought these up, or this is just a random one?
So it's actually going into what happened. So that was a project that we did with the East End Art Council. The East End Art Council is a collective organization, nonprofit that's out of Riverhead. And they're pretty well funded. They have a nice location right in downtown Riverhead. They do the community mosaic every year on Memorial Day, and they do a lot of really cool things. And this guy Steve Woosen, who is part of the East End Art Council, found me in the Creative Vortex and asked if there was a way that we could collaborate and come up with an idea to help promote what the East End Arts Council was doing throughout the island.
Right. Am I jumping ahead? Because I don't want to. I'll go back.
This is exactly what you have posted right there. Was
where
exactly
you're at next.
What we came up with. And
okay.
This came out of journaling. I kind of went back and forth in my journal, and this thing came out that said shifting reality across Long Island. And I talked to the guy who had trained me in signs, and I said, how can we build this? And we got some masonite board for like $8, and we got some PVC, and we built this thing, and we backlit it, and we started doing stuff in warehouses, and it went from warehouses to the brick house to 16 to 20 different locations throughout Long Island. And we got a lot of press. We got a lot of really cool things that happened throughout the whole thing. And what we were seeing was people would just jump in, especially when we did it like bars and stuff like that. People would just jump in and start painting. And a lot of times they, didn't express themselves through painting or anything.
Right. Never done it before.
It just worked. It had legs. And also back in 2012, there was some cool stuff going on. There's this guy, Rich Rifkin, who used to do this thing in Huntington where he would have like music and different painters painting in like a bar out in Huntington, I remember. And that was one of the locations I did. So it was awesome because I showed up there and all those artists jumped on the board with us. So, like we started to get like a little bit of a following, which was neat. And two of the most powerful things that we did on that run was first, I worked with the Spirit of Huntington which was a organization that works with children with special needs.
Okay.
And that was a really inspirational. So now it was like, up until that point, we were going to bars, we were like creating stuff in factories, we did stuff with painters, but now we did something. It was like the first time with kids, and it was with kids who had special needs, but again, like they just jumped onto it, and
it must have been like an amazing, like such a different energy, because these kids have no, like they're just like eating it up. I would imagine they were just so excited.
It was the coolest. It was definitely at that point, it was one of the coolest moments I've ever experienced, because it completely broke me out of where my headspace was with what the potential was. And the next place that we did St. Charles. We set it up for patients with head injuries.
Okay.
And that again was it was like a therapeutic aspect of it that I had never noticed.
Mm-hmm.
And so the thing had legs. We started doing more and more of these things. And it was cool. Like I think we did the Great South Bay in 2012. We did all the artwork for that. And
that's great.
Constantly we're like, pushing the envelope for what we could come up with next. Mm-hmm. And like I said, there was a lot of mistakes, a lot of learning curves that had to come out of it. For a while, it was myself and a collective of different artists that kind of stepped up. And there was like 4 or 5 of us that really made a go for about a year or so to see what we can come up with. And I found that ego, especially on my end, kind of got in the way. Like I kind of started losing the message. I was looking to see where it would fit, and everybody will jump in and give you ideas. People like birthday parties and bar mitzvahs and stuff like that.
Right. Make it into a business. Right.
Exactly. But it's like, as soon as you do that, like, you just kind of, for me anyway, I lost something.
Sure.
And so,
but wait, let me interrupt you again. And I'm sorry to do that, because what it sounded like earlier, and I'm just kind of responding to this, because I know for me, in my conversations and the groups that I kind of put myself in with these spiritual people, a lot of the messages that I've heard recently, I find for me that messages kind of come in waves, right? So there'll be like a couple of weeks I'll be hearing like the same phrase, oh, I just heard that. Oh, and I'll need to figure out, okay, there's a message in that phrase, right? But what I've been hearing about, as far as like the spiritual journey and how to do it successfully, right? And the point of the spiritual journey is to be your true self.
Right.
It sounds like you were actually providing yourself with these experiences. You said a couple times in the story, like, I had never felt that way before.
Yeah.
Right? Little steps along the way where you're like, oh, I felt this thing. And I was like, wait, what is this? I've never felt this before. And then you went with it, and it allowed you to feel it again. Another step where you're like, oh, I've never felt this before. And you were following your highest passion, your greatest joy was bringing you to those things because it felt so good, and it was feeding itself almost, it sounds like.
It was. It's just, like I said, sometimes, you could have the best intentions in the world and misstep. And I definitely, I definitely made a lot of mistakes along the way, for sure, and had to take a step back and reevaluate and really kind of take those moments that I was telling you about and ask myself what they really meant. And at the same time, I also really wanted to start that sign business, because I knew that this was going to be a stepping stone into, what I really wanted to do.
Okay.
And so I kind of, I took a step back and I threw my eggs into creating Sound Beach signs. And I did Sound Beach signs while I worked in the home improvement industry from 2012 until 2020. I was doing both.
Okay.
And I would do a couple things like every year. So like the Benner Farm does this thing called the Folk and Fiddle Fest. And every year that was kind of a staple for us. We would do the Folk and Fiddle Fest. every year, like I throw a party and I would do something at my house. Once I got studio space or a shop space, I was doing different types of projects where we would do interesting things. Like I did a lot of it's a lot of amazing writers on Long Island, and my daughter found her voice with the writers, and so we met a lot of amazing people, and we started doing vortexes in my shop where we would have people do spoken word along with the painting and the music, and that was awesome. And things were going pretty cool up until 2020, and then all hell broke loose, and you couldn't do anything out in public anymore, and you couldn't do anything next to each other. And for me, it was devastating. I mean, one of the coolest moments I had throughout the whole project was at the Benner's Folk and Fiddle Festival, and there was this girl that came up with her parents, and she was looking at the project, at our board, and she's walking around, and the parents kept encouraging her, and she was very shy. Mm-hmm. And the next thing you know, she grabs a paintbrush and blew all of us away. Like, she just started painting like the most amazing scenery all over this thing, and she was there for hours. And her energy was pulling other people in, adults and children, because children always come to these things. Whenever we would do something, we become like the babysitter, and kids, not even a problem. Parents bring them up. They're like, "You want to paint?" They're like, "Of course." And then you challenge the parents, "Do you want to paint?" And they're like, "No, I don't," But this girl had this energy where she got a lot of people were kind of jumping in with her. And it was like one of the best moments I've ever had. And then to have it just shut down was devastating. And then on top of that, I started having my own issues. I was introduced to panic attacks. I mean, I remember I went into a Stop and Shop, and some guy was wearing like a bandana, and there were gloves all over the floor. And I was just like, I'm out, this is too much. And and then I thought, like, okay, so we have a pandemic. This should be great because, I got laid off at work. This would be a great time to be inspired, and I could just make stuff happen. And I remember a year later, I had to get together with a bunch of artists. We were all kind of getting back into the groove of hanging out and stuff like that. And I remember saying, like, dude, I didn't get anything done. And a lot of my friends were like, me neither. It's just, it was such a heady experience. And to rebuild what we were doing, I couldn't figure out how.
Sure. It seemed overwhelming.
It just, there was a momentum. The momentum was interrupted. So, I started doing, I just recently did a gig for the Middle Country Public Library, where they wanted to do a group painting with the kids in the neighborhood. And they used the term vibes was the word that they wanted to use. So I created a piece for them. And it was the first time I had done a piece outside of doing stuff at my house privately. And it hit exactly the way it was supposed to. It was exciting. Yeah, that's it. It was exciting to build. It was, interactive with music. That was another project.
I was trying to get the pictures from the whole vibes. I thought it was all vibes, but it's not.
No, so that was a workshop I did when I did my TEDx talk, and that was 2018. And then the one that you had with the two hands shaking each other, the concept of that, there was another TEDx talk at the Metham High School, and their concept was together in the divide. So that was my workshop.
Nice.
And that was my design.
That's a great image for that phrase.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
So
very creative.
These were that 2019 was like a great year. We did that. We organized an art show that was amazing at the which is called the Eastern Arts Council with like 20 different artists. It was a great year, but it just totally got derailed. And then to get back onto it, it took, like I said, I vibes we just did in February, and that was the first time I did something publicly since then. Time felt right. Things felt relatively safe. My headspace was good for it.
Mhm.
And we had done a couple at my house that just hit. You know, they always hit when we do them here.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I think I was also looking for what was the next incarnation. And that's when I got together with Mike Vincenti. And that was an interesting story also. We did this thing called the 3 Cents Podcast. And that was actually inspired by my mother. Because in after 2020, with the panic attacks and stuff like that, I really started to dive deep into soul searching again.
Okay.
And I was having, you know, I was really trying to build back, you know, like my soul, because it would have been very easy for me to go the other direction. And I was posting about my journey a lot on Facebook, and definitely probably putting out way too much information. Definitely too much for my mother, because she called me up and she was like, I don't think you should post this stuff on Facebook. And her and I had like a whole thing.
Right.
But then she was like, I think you should do a podcast. And I was like, it's not a bad idea. So simultaneously, I'd been trying to figure out how to get a better workout in. I was listening to a lot of like heavy metal and throwing my back out constantly and stuff like that, you know, at the gym. And I'm like, this isn't working. So
too much energy, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, what if I go the total opposite direction and I concentrate on stuff like gratitude and love and health and strength and I, you know, came up with like a practice in between reps. So it's like I would do a rep, and then I would the first question would be like, what am I thankful for? Just think, what am I thankful for? And come up with that. Then the next question would be like, how am I going to express love today? You know, and I would think about, you know, an interaction with my daughter or with my wife. You know, how can I be more thoughtful instead of reactionary? You know, like how can I get past myself or you know, just about that instant gratification that we were talking about and look at the bigger picture.
Right.
Or just being in the gym and just trying to be compassionate towards the people around you and not judgmental and stuff like that. You know, that how can I express love?
Right.
The third question was, how can I maintain health? How do I make what I'm doing a step in the right direction as far as my health is concerned? And the last question was, how can I actually find my strength to get through the next rep? And that usually became, all these questions became deeper than just what would be your surface questions, because, you know, you have an hour at the gym, you're doing 4 reps of each, you know, the questions get deep. And I thought like, okay, I'm getting primed for this like podcast with this whole, you know, business of a practice, and we're going to, you know, talk to people and we're going to talk to them about, you know, the things that bind us together. And that was the whole point of the 3 Cents Podcast. It was Mike, myself, and the third person makes 3. And we were talking about things that, you know, make sense.
I love it.
And we were really, the point was to kind of try to find a togetherness in all the division that's just everywhere. And I, you know, it had legs. I mean, we were going somewhere. We were finding our voice. There were some interesting moments in the podcast where, like, I'd never done anything like that.
Right.
And then I would do all like the editing, right? And you really learn a lot from editing, because now all of a sudden, hey, I say a lot. And I say, you know what I mean? Like, and now I got to cut all that out, or weird breathing. And, you know, and now you have to be conscious of what you're saying, because that's the difference in between a 5-hour edit night or a 1-hour edit night. And then, you know, that, so, you know, it was a really interesting discussion. You know, I also realized I don't listen real good, you know, and how am I going to have a podcast if I'm not listening to what's going on? And so there was a lot of really cool things that were coming through in the podcast that was teaching us lessons while we were growing in this direction. And then we had plans to go into 2023 we'd set like a few guests up, and Mike had some pretty exciting ideas. And then I got a phone call, and it was my mom's phone. It was like 2 days after her birthday, and we just talked to her, and it was an EMT. And he was like, "We think your mom just had a stroke. We're taking her to the hospital." And I just flew home from Pennsylvania like that day, and I was like under the weather. And so I remember I like got off the plane, I came home, took a shower, got in bed. 5 minutes later, the phone rang. Next thing you know, I'm in the car and I'm driving to Lancaster from Long Island. It's like 4.5 hour drive. And they're, the doctors are calling me up and they're asking me all sorts of weird questions. And I don't know anything about my mother's health care at all. She was a very private person.
Right.
We knew that something was going on for a couple of months, but we thought it was something with like her stomach, and she was taking care of it. It was one of those things where she was supposed to get a test done, but weird things kept happening. Like she was supposed to go on this date and then she got COVID, or,
Right.
stuff like that. And it constantly got, from like, we had our first discussion in September and started noticing things. And I noticed she dropped like 40 pounds. Like I went out,
Wow.
when she told me that something was weird, and I'm like, I saw her energy level was off and she had lost a ton of weight. But again, we thought it was something with her stomach, and she's diabetic and this, that, and the other thing. So we just figured, okay, they'll do a scan. They'll see what it is. They'll throw some pills at her and it'll be over. Right. So now this happened. I get to the hospital. It was like 11 o'clock at night. And my mom is like laying in this hospital bed, and she looks even lighter. And I just remember like being shocked by what I saw in the bed.
Yeah.
I just was so vulnerable. It just did not look like my mother. It looked like a child. She presented as a child, and one of the nurse's assistants came over and was telling me that it wasn't a stroke, that they found some abnormalities that they wanted to discuss the next day. And I saw, like the computer screen, but I didn't know how to make sense of what I was seeing. So I remember, I stayed with my mom for like an hour or so. I went to, I checked in at a hotel, crashed, got there the next morning, and I'm talking to this neurologist, and he's telling me, he shows me this picture, right, of my mom's brain, and it's insane. Like half of my mom's brain is like this cloudy area, and he's like, we think this is lymphoma, right? He says, but we don't know until we do some sort of a biopsy. So I take a picture of this CAT scan or whatever that was up on the wall, and I send it to my wife. And she's working in Florida, and one of her clients is a doctor at Sloan Kettering.
Okay.
She sees that picture and says, you have to get him or get your mother out of that hospital now. And you have to get her to UPenn in Philadelphia immediately. And so it was weird. Like I didn't know what to do. Right. Like
this is powerful. Yeah.
Well, because the doctors are like, coming up with like a plan. And I remember like my mom, like it started to get scary for her, I think, because she like looked at me and she was like, can't we just go home? And I had to be like the one to be like, well, Ma, yeah, we could. But if you have another episode like what you just had and you're driving your car, because she was driving the day she had the stroke, what if it had had, or not the stroke, it was a seizure. What if that had happened while she was behind the wheel?
Right.
And so like I had to be the one to like kind of convince her of this. And so the hospital she was at, they just like that day, like I had to make the choice, like it was either we're going to sit there and let these doctors do it, and I talked to the doctor from Sloan Kettering, and she was like, look, there are some very capable people at Lancaster General for sure. But what I'm seeing in that picture needs the best. And that's what you need to do. And so I ended up, I wasn't getting anywhere with like the social workers or, the neurologists and stuff like that. But there was one young doctor who was on my mom's floor, and that guy did everything for us. He was like, "What's going on?" I kind of told him. He made the call to Philadelphia, to UPenn. We got the head of the brain tumor department was the name that was given to me by this other doctor. This was like the guy, his name was Dr. Amakalor. He was like, ran the division. Okay. And he responded, and they were like, "Okay, she's in. We got to wait for a bed." So I got there, let's say Tuesday. I was there Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Like, I had to finally get like my laundry done. And so my father lived like 2 hours north of where we were. So I told my mother, I'm like, I'm going to drive up to my dad's. And I didn't think, they were going to transport her, like on a Friday or Saturday night. And I was wrong. Like halfway up to my dad's, I get the phone call. They're like, "Okay, bed opened up. We're going to transport her to Philadelphia like right now."
Oh my God.
Yeah. It was like 10 o'clock at night on I think it was Saturday. So by the time I got to my father's house, they had already got her to Philly. And that was an amazing experience as far as the care that she got. Like the doctors were calling me, letting me know every step of the way, what was going on. Even that night, they're like, "We love your mother. She's hilarious. We got her all set." And the next day I drove down and I went to Philly. So that was Sunday. Long story short, Tuesday, they did a brain biopsy. And the doctor had mentioned the word glioblastoma, which I'd never heard before. But my mom knew what it was, and my wife knew what it was. And my wife was like, "Don't look it up."
Right.
So, of course, I looked it up. And when you Google glioblastoma, it's a death sentence. You know what I mean? Like, once it's glioblastoma and it's, grade 3 or grade 4, you typically have about 15 months.
Wow.
Okay? And so, but I was told that this was a lymphoma. So I was like, "What's lymphoma?" And the doctor was like, "We can totally cure that. And she's young, so it'll be fine." So I was like, right, that's what it's going to be.
Right.
So they did the brain biopsy Tuesday. My wife and I went back to straighten out my mother's apartment. And my mother had put herself in this like senior kind of living situation.
Okay.
Which I thought was like crazy young at the time. She did it like in her like early 60s, right? Everybody else in there was like 80, but whatever.
Right.
Ended up being like the best thing she could have done. So she's got an apartment in a facility, but as you grow older, you can go into like skilled care and nursing care, and it kind of carries you, through the whole journey.
Right.
And so the plan is that my mother was going to have to go back to the nursing facility, because when they do a brain biopsy, it's just basically like a managed head injury,
Okay.
And so we wanted to clean her apartment up for her so that when she got out of the nursing care, she could go right back to her room and everything would be safe. And we figure out what we were going to do with nursing and this, that, and the other thing. And
right.
So the next morning she woke up from the brain biopsy. Like, we came back, we saw her when she came out of surgery. The doctor called me from surgery, and I just remember his voice sucked. He was just like, "I'm just going to do everything we can." You know what I mean? And I don't know. I kind of had this feeling, but whatever. And the next morning, Wednesday, she woke up and she had what they called cognitive aphasia, right? Where like she couldn't find the words of what was on her mind. Mm-hmm. And I remember like walking in and trying to have a conversation with her, and it just wasn't going the way it should have. And I looked at the nurse, and the nurse pulled me aside and was like, "This is what it's called. I've made note of it. When the swelling goes down, this will probably go away." Mm-hmm. Thursday, they get her out of the hospital, right? So they go in, they take out a huge chunk of whatever this was. Doctor said if I took out any more, she would never walk again, right? Mm-hmm. And we go back to Willow Valley, which is where my mom lives, and we put her in nursing care. And I've been with my mom now for like 2 weeks every day. You know, I walked every bit of this journey with her, and now I got to leave. I got to like leave her, you know, with nobody. Like, you know, there's no other family. My dad's not in the picture.
Wow.
There's no other brothers or sisters. It's just me and her, you know?
Right.
And so I have to leave, you know, and the doctor's going to do like a Zoom call and give us like the results in a couple of days. And so I remember like I came back to Long Island, and that ride home was so rough. And I woke up, and I was the next day, and I had like all this work that had like accumulated for the couple of weeks I was gone. I was like, I'm just going to get it done. I'm just going to get my work done. And I just kept screwing up. Like everything I was doing, I couldn't get anything right. And it was so frustrating. And then I was like, all right, I'm going to scrap this, and I'm going to go to the gym. And I kept saying I was going to do that from like 12 o'clock until like 3 o'clock. I'm going to go to the gym. Just something would happen. Then I got a phone call from UPenn, and this lady was from the brain tumor. She was like the nurse navigator for the brain tumor center. And I don't think she meant to confirm that it was a brain tumor, but she did. And I remember like
being who she was, right?
You know, like,
yeah.
I remember I went in, I heard what she said, and then I said, so this is definitely a brain tumor. This isn't like, and she was like, oh yeah. And I remember like I went into my car, and I just sat there, and I was stuck in my truck for 3 hours. I couldn't do anything.
Wow.
You know, and I called, I did reach out to the doctor from Sloan Kettering, and she just leveled with me, you know, and she was just like, look, this is what I think it is. Mm-hmm. It's serious, and strap in. And I called my wife after 3 hours, and I'm like, you have to come home and get me out of the car, because I can't get out of the car.
Wow.
And it just, you know, it was horrible. Like those next couple of days were horrible, but the worst was when the doctor finally called us, which was like Monday. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he flat out said, he was like, this is stage 3 or 4 glioblastoma. Right. And it was like we had like 3 different oncologists that we talked to, and it was like the information just like came so quick. Mm-hmm. It was like, it's glioblastoma. This doctor's going to talk to you about radiation. This doctor's going to talk to you about the long-term care. What we do is we treat it with palliative care. I didn't even know what that word meant. Right. It was like they just threw all this at us. And all of a sudden, that thing that I looked up, you know, she's got like 15 months was real, you know. So mm-hmm. I started going out to Pennsylvania like every other week. Mm-hmm. So it's like, you know, it's a 4.5 hour drive. I'd be getting up at like 4 a.m, getting there at like 8 o'clock in the morning, getting her to like different doctor's appointment. And she had this one friend from work named Deanne, who has been like our right hand. Like she's part of the family at this point. She got my mom to like all these like radiations that they did. And check this out, like radiation, like you don't know, they don't tell you. Like they're like, oh, well, it's going to be like 6 weeks of radiation and chemotherapy. But with my mom, they had to cut it in half because her cancer is throughout her entire brain, right? Mm-hmm. And so between her age and how much cancer is there, they were like, we can't give her the full dose because it'll, you know, wreak havoc. Right. And we give her like this Temidar, and it's like an oral medication, and you know, they make it sound like it's no big deal, but what it did was my mom got neuropathy, right? Mm-hmm. And the neuropathy that she got makes her feel like she's freezing cold no matter what. So you could throw like 100 blankets on her and light her on fire, and she would still feel like she's freezing cold. Right. So she's, you know, there's that, and then there's just a lot of it. Just sucked. It just, yeah, you know what I mean. And it was just every time I would go out there, you know, like early on, it was like getting all of our finances together and stuff. And like, and I had her apartment to stay in, but it was like, you know, just this ride of like being like, hey, she's never going to go back to her apartment. How am I going to manage that? Hey, they're making me get rid of her apartment. How am I going to manage that? Because if I tell her any of this stuff, she'll just, you know what I mean, spiral, you know.
Right.
And
Right.
she's got all this hope in the world. Like she was like, I'm gonna fight, you know. And you know, there was a little bit of warrior aspect of that, and it was pretty inspiring. And there was a lot of fear too. Like one day we had this discussion, and she was just like, I don't know if I'm going to heaven. I was like, what do you mean? She was like, you know, my grandparents were Southern Baptists, and very, very, you know, no drinking, no swearing, no fun, anything. And but that's the way they raised us, and they were good people, but like, you know, they were hardcore. And my mom was like, I just realized one day that I just don't see things the way that they see things. And I don't know what that means for my soul. And so like now I'm in this position where I'm playing, you know, the parent and being like, Mom, like, you know, listen, you know, like, you've done everything that you possibly could do to be a good person. And if you talk to anybody who knows my mother and where she worked, which is Millersville College and stuff, university, she was somebody who would like connect people and like look out for people and get people from point A to point B. And she was always full of energy, sometimes a lot of energy, you know what I mean? But like, she was always a good person at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And dude, like this stuff is hard, you know what I mean? And there's no one, you know, the entire time, like I'm just noticing more and more things. Like she's, you know, doing weird things when she's walking, and she's not saying, you know, things the right way. And it's getting harder and harder to get her in and out of the car. And I got to process all this stuff, and there's nobody I can talk to. I mean, I remember like having a few discussions with some people where they're like, hey man, how are things going? And like, you know, you're just so exhausted from everything. The rhetorical answer is not going to happen. And sometimes like I remember like throwing 2 barrels at people and being like, you want to know? Okay, this is what's going on. And just having to be like, I don't even know what to say. And be like, yeah, that just makes me feel 80 times more lonely. So a couple things happened. Number one, a couple years earlier, my close friend John had passed, and suddenly, and it inspired me to do something. And that's when I started riding my bike. At that point, I couldn't even ride like 3 miles. And I got this goal to start riding. I wanted to build up to the point where I could go like 40 miles at the Greenport. And I was like, I'm going to do it by September. So he died in like June. And by September, I built my way up to be able to do that. And what I found was, like when John passed, I remember being so angry at the world when I had to be back in it. You know, it's like for that first week when I'm like, you know, in funerals and with all of our friends, and you're just like in that zone. And there's almost like a safety in that zone. And then you go back into the real world, and like life has just completely moved on. And you're just so like, you know, so angry about it. And I was so angry that like life had just gone on and nobody understood this loss, you know? And so like the cycling helped me get my head into more of a place where I could be sustainable. And it got me back into practicing, because when you're on the bike, you have to be in the moment. You have to be paying attention to what you're doing, what your body's doing, how you're breathing, how the bike is operating. Otherwise, you're going to get hurt.
Right.
And so, you know, and then I realized like all this stuff that I had been learning, you know, with my practice of gratitude and health and love and all that stuff was for this moment. You know, so we were talking about supernatural stuff, like something was at work pushing me to do these things for a reason. And I thought it was this. And there's so many points in my life where like, I think that I'm going this direction.
Right.
And it turns out, no, it's this is what you need this for.
Right.
And I started writing to handle what was happening with my mother, because it's a lonely journey. There's nowhere to put that energy. If I sit with it, it's going to come out and it's not going to be good.
Right.
But if I get on my bike, you know, I could push through that moment. I could push through these 30 miles. If I could push through these 30 miles, and my mom is pushing through chemo and losing everything and all this uncertainty and stuff like that, and all like the stages of grief that she's not sharing with me because she's trying to protect me.
Right.
If she can climb those mountains, I can climb this mountain, and we can do this, together. And I can find the strength to be what she needs, because you just lose so much control as a caregiver. Like you can't stop what's happening. At the end of the day, you just can't. And so all I can do is work to be a source of strength for my mother, a source of calm, and just try to do something. So one of the most heartbreaking things that happened was we got this oncologist when we came back. And palliative care, if you don't know what it is, it's just basically like make you comfortable. Like they give you like the standard of care when you have glioblastoma. It's a disease that they found like 100 years ago, but the standard of care for it hasn't changed. And basically, like a lot of cancers, the way that it operates is like, let's say you have a jello mold, right? And you take like a strawberry and you throw that in the jello mold. You could go in and you could take out the strawberry and you still have the jello mold. With glioblastoma, it actually it actually mutates the brain material into the cancer. So when they did that brain biopsy, they were taking out chunks of brain. You know what I mean? That it just, and sometimes the cancer grows so fast it starts killing the center, and the brain starts dying from the inside out. It's insidious, and it just it goes quick. My mom has been fighting it though. I mean, we're like 17, 18 months in now.
Wow.
At this point, and she's the doctor used the word remarkably stable. It gets a little overwhelming, but anyway.
Well, Eric, I got to say, I thank you so much for being so vulnerable and sharing all of this. It's there's so much love in it, you know what I mean, in this story, and I know how powerful and emotional it probably is for you. So thank you for sharing. And
like I said, I never even heard the word glioblastoma before, and what was inspiring to me about my mom's journey was she the first thing she said was, where are all the studies, where's all the research, like what's going on? And she had heard a couple of things, and her and one of the women that lived next door to her when she had an apartment went through like all of the research they could on different things. Like there's stuff called CyberKnife, which you can look into. There's a lot of like stuff like there's different things that people are doing anecdotally, I think is the right word that I want to use there, but nothing that's on, like the bigger spectrum. Like most people, they're going to get their poison for 6 weeks and then take their other poison for 6 months. And then they'll either throw more drugs at them to give them another month, and then they're going to die.
Right.
Or they take nothing and they die in like 3 to 4 months. And that's it. That's where we've come in 100 years with this particular disease. But she wanted to know where the research was. So I brought her to her oncologist. She brought the stack of papers like this thick. And she said to the doctor, she was like, I did all this research. Like, is there anything in here that can help? And the doctor took that research, put it here, and totally blew it off.
Wow.
Totally blew it off. And I just watched like my mom's face drop. Like she just like that woman kicked the hope right out of my mother.
Wow.
And I saw it, and so now I'm riding my bike this year, and I'm like, I got to do this for something. I got to do it for a reason. And I practice on this trail here. It's where I train, and I met this guy who was like probably 75 years old. He was at the end of the trail, and we were talking about our bikes and stuff like that. And he was telling me about the Erie Canalway Trail, which goes from Buffalo to Albany. And he was like, yeah, I'm going to do it. I was like, yeah, that's awesome. I'm like, I got to check this out. So, I went and I looked it up, and it's 360 miles from Buffalo to Albany. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this. I mean, first off, the number, like the 360 number, just like stood out. I'm like, you know, it's a circle. It's all encompassing. That's what's going on here. It's significant, and it's a challenge. And I think we can do this, and we can do this in honor of my mother. And then I was looking up research organizations, and I found the Glioblastoma Research Organization, which was started by a woman who, same kind of situation. Her father was diagnosed with glioblastoma. He died pretty quickly. I think she was looking to get involved in different nonprofits. It's like you want to do something because you have no control. So you want to do something. And so she ended up creating the Glioblastoma Research Organization. And I reached out to them, and I told them what I wanted to do. And they gave me a pathway to create a fundraiser. I was looking to, like, right now, obviously, this is where all of my energy is directed. It's in between going to my mom's, helping to take care of her and kind of get her through what we're going through, and this ride, which the awesome thing is the nurses are going to have like a whole Babs day when I start doing the ride. And I made t-shirts, so they all have a shirt. She's got a shirt, and you know, the one thing I had hoped is that she was still going to be with us when I do the ride, and she's still here.
Yeah, and this is coming up pretty soon. This is July 14th, everybody. I'm putting up the page right here. There's a GoFundMe if you want to help out and get involved and support Eric in this. I think it's so amazing what you're doing, Eric. And I've told you just personally, like, you know, just in the last 2 weeks, getting to know you and your story, just how inspiring it is. And I'm glad, you know, that she's still here, and you know, this is coming soon, and she could be here for this. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and that's the thing. Like, now, as we go through this journey, and I was talking to you about that practice, you know, the things that I'm grateful for is, you know, like I've gotten to see who my mother is, you know, sort of, well, on levels that just blow me away, you know, like she has never complained once to me about any of this. And whenever you talk to her, she's pleasant. She, you know, she had a photographic memory. So what she's done is she's taken like a number of social interactions and kind of like put it in a tape recording in her brain. And so when she, you know, for a long time, people would come in and be like, wow, she seems remarkably great. And it's like, yeah, she's just hitting play, you know, and kind of like running through these scenarios. And she was able to pull that off, you know, up until recently. Wow. You know, where people would come in and she'd just be like, good morning. And like, you know, just have these like simple pleasantries that, you know, these like rhetorical interactions that we have in the day to day. My mom was able to pull off and like kind of be like, you know, she would pull it off.
Right.
But, you know, like just to see that kind of strength in her trying to protect me from any kind of difficulty or sadness and stuff like that. She's more like at this stage of the game, right? She can't really have conversations long term. She can't walk anymore. She's lost a lot of weight. She's still eating good, but it's rough. You know, like this last visit I went out there, like it was hard. It was a hard trip. But even this last trip, she like looked at me and she was just like, we have to make sure that things are in order. And like, she forced herself to be able to get that sentence out. Like she's worried about like making sure that like, you know, everything is, all the arrangements are taken care of, because she knows that's the hardest part. She's in there. She's conscious. She knows what's happening. She just can't verbalize it. You know, some of it's confusion, but there's a big part of her spirit.
Well, yeah, you know, I again, I'm not one to claim to be intuitive and stuff, right? But sometimes I'll have conversations and I'll kind of perceive things, right? And from what you just said, you said she was playing the tape, right? And she was just these pleasantries just to make sure that everybody else was comfortable, is what you're kind of saying. But for me, what I'm hearing and what I'm getting from that is, even if it was a tape and like kind of like an auto, it was authentic.
Oh yeah.
It's coming from a really good heart, a really good place that is authentic. So it doesn't matter that it's a tape, you know what I mean? Like, and if she's doing it to protect you, it's real, and it's love, right? It's based on love.
Yeah, that intention, you know what I mean? The intention to protect is there.
Yeah.
And I feel that, so like I've gotten to witness what selfless love looks like. Yeah. And that makes me want to push myself harder for my family, because again, like when you lose all this control, where can you put it? And the only place that I can put it is, I have a daughter and I have a wife, and I've got a lot of work to do, because there are days that I just don't nail it. You know what I mean? Like I'm in it hard. Sure. And so every day is a new day. Every day the sun comes up, to meet the warrior, and it's a new chance to start and to get it right, and when you make the mistake, if you can learn from it, it's a good situation. And that's what I strive for. Like the canvas forever was on the wall and I didn't know what to do with it. And then it turned into the canvas that I could share with other people. Mm-hmm. And now, like, I'm the canvas, mm-hmm. And I'm just, like this bubble that I'm in is the canvas with my family, sure. With the people that my words, my actions actually can have an effect, mm-hmm. And if I, can be inspired by this horrible moment to do something better,
right.
That's something, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You're creating your next higher self, right? You're working on that next version of you that's gone through this experience fully. Right now you're going through it, but the next version of you will have gone through it already, in full. And it sounds to me like you're very well prepared, even though you might not feel like you are. It sounds to me like, there's so much that authenticity that I was talking about in your mom comes through in everything that you're talking to me about, in the whole story, Eric, about how the Long Island Vortex was created. I mean, that's just, to me, that came from somewhere, right? That came from somewhere through you to unite people, to create, and I believe, that is one of our ultimate purposes here as human beings, right? Part of this human journey is to create, right, on whatever medium that is: painting, drawing, writing, music. Loving another human being is creating, and
sure.
and I feel like you're so in touch with that, and it's just really so heartwarming. And again, I appreciate you sharing your story so much. I know the end was a little heavy, but it's also very inspiring. So the beginning of the story with the Long Island Creative Vortex, so much like excitement and great, and then now you have this dark period that you're going through. But I feel like you're taking this dark time right now and you're honing the light out of it. You're finding the light in this dark situation. Like,
that's the only way. Like, before I said, like, my purpose when it comes to my mother, and the only thing I have control over is being this source of calm and strength. And the only way I can do that is to keep redirecting towards a purpose, because if I don't, I'll spiral. Sure. You know what I mean? Like, sure. It's so easy to, like, like when you're not conscious in this moment, it's so easy to start really trashing yourself. You know what I mean? Like, did I do enough? Like when I leave my mom and I have to drive back to Long Island and I'm leaving her alone, the entire time, like, there is stuff going on in my head. And if I'm not conscious of what's going on, that will kill me. You know what I mean? Like, and so, it'll kill me, or it'll come out and manifest in other ways. You know what I mean? In anger, you know what I mean? Which I don't have time for anymore.
Right.
You know, the biggest lesson you learn, especially as a bystander of somebody who has a limited amount of time, is that we all have a limited amount of time, and none of us wanted, like, you notice in the conversations that I've had over the last, you know, year and a half, that there's a defense mechanism, I think, built in us to survive. And so having these discussions, it's uncomfortable, right? But like, I'm 50, you know what I mean? And, you know, how much time do I have? 50 hit quick. Yesterday I was 20, you know what I mean? And
Right.
I don't feel
Yeah.
different either, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, things
I 100% I relate to what you say. I'm 57. and it's like, you know, it's just crazy, because it's like, how did 57? I really, I experienced 57 years. Like, it doesn't, it's like, yeah,
No.
I totally get it. I totally get it.
You know,
but I think, you know, I think that's, as far as like me personally, the place that I'm in, I've never been more comfortable with who I am in my whole entire life, because I know the energy that I carry. I know the energy that I give off. You know what I mean? I know how I affect other people. And not only do I know it, but I know that I'm very intentional with that energy, right? I'm not just like, well, screw other people and I'm just going to do what makes me happy. Like, you know, I understand the power of love and sharing love and caring for other people, and I think what you're doing goes even up above and beyond that, right? You're almost sacrificing some of your own things to show this love, to achieve this mission that is really symbolic and significant to both you and your mom, you know?
Yeah, it doesn't feel like a sacrifice, you know, like,
right. Exactly. Right. And that's the best part. I'm so happy you said that, because I think a lot of people watching will be like, wow, he's giving up some of his own life for this, but this is your life. This is your love. This is your mother.
Yeah. I guess when you're in it, at least for me, I just don't see it that way. You know, like,
that's why it's so authentic. Yeah. That's what's so beautiful about it, dude. That's amazing. You know what I mean? Like, and, you know, I lost my dad, you know, in 2010 to cancer, and it happened very quick. And again, the whole experience that we went through, going and taking care of him and everything, it was so spiritual. You know what I mean? It got us closer to each other. It got us closer to ourselves, you know, like exactly like you're describing. You're closer to your mother now than you've ever been. You're closer to yourself. You're understanding yourself more. You know, the whole idea of going on these bike rides and just going within, right? You're like, you're in outer space. You're physically riding the bike, but your mind is in itself, you know.
I just wrote about it yesterday, because there are like, all right, so like this week in particular, like I told you it was a rough week, and so I'm so close to this ride, like, you know, I'm like training every day. Right. And I was doing like this yesterday. I was doing like a 30-mile ride, and I was just in my head instead of on the bike. And when you're in your head, like, you just like lose all perspective. And the next thing you know, it's like hills are harder. The wind feels more resistance. Like everything it's just harder to get through what you're trying to do. And so I was able to kind of pull out of it by, you know, like, to me, like, you know, from being on the bike, when I'm not on the bike, I end up like going through a checklist, you know, like, where are my feet? That's like the most important thing. Like, where are my toes on the pedal? Where's my heel? Did I drop my heel? Do I have my heel up in the right position? When I'm pushing and I'm pulling on my legs, where's that energy coming from? Is this going to hurt me if I'm doing it wrong? Am I doing it wrong? I know how to do it right. You know, am I doing it right? How's my breathing? You know what I mean? Like, and I just go through like this checklist of what's going on inside me. How's my bike operating? Scan the road. What's going on in front of me? Am I going to get like some rabbit jumping out in front of me, or a turtle or something like that, or a pothole? Right. And the next thing you know, I'm back in the moment. And that's where you have to be on the bike. And it's exactly where you have to be when you're with a loved one who is dying. You need to be in that moment. You can't be in your head having discussions about what you could have done, what you should have done, this, that, and the other thing. You've got this time. This is it. And then they're gone.
Right.
You know what I mean? And you know, John, he died like 2 years ago. His ghost doesn't come back to me, like he's gone. You know what I mean? So this is my time right now, and every minute counts. You know what I mean? And it means something. So, you know, trying to stay present is more important now than it's ever been, especially when I'm like, you know, with my mother and stuff. And that's what the bike riding, especially when it comes to the endurance part of it, is training me, you know. And it gets, I think I told you off air, it gets psychedelic, but it's not psychedelic because I'm not in the moment. It's psychedelic because it's the most in the moment that I've ever been.
Right, exactly. Yeah, totally. No, I totally get that. That's again, that's the pureness, that's the authenticity that I'm talking about. That's like the spirituality that I'm talking about, you know, the metaphysical other world. Like there's another aspect that's beyond the physical.
Yeah.
I think that's what you're touching. Eric, again, I'm so happy that we had this conversation. I could kind of keep doing this for hours, I think, but I didn't even realize it's 10:30. Wow, and everybody's still with us. That's awesome. I definitely want to keep up on your story. Maybe we'll have you back in a couple weeks after the ride to tell us about the experience. But I'm gonna sign off with you for now, and just again thank you for such a wonderful conversation. I'm super happy to have connected with you, and we'll talk after this. Don't go away when I put you in the green room. Don't sign off, because I want to talk to you about, you know, working together in the future.
Absolutely.
I definitely think we can. Do you have any parting words of wisdom for my audience?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, thank you for doing this. I think it's important to have discussions of all different kinds about consciousness, and this was a very authentic and comfortable environment, and I appreciate you, and I appreciate the energy that you have. You made this very easy to have a discussion, so thank you for that. And you know, as far as parting words, right now, like I said, there's so many ways that we're being pulled. Now it's more important to really pay attention and look at what really matters and what you really have control over. Control has been the biggest thing that I've had to deal with, and the lack of control and where to put my energy. And chances are that the most powerful place is already right in front of you, and you just got to look right at it and acknowledge it for what it is. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Yep.
And that would be, I guess, where I'm at right now.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And that's a big thing for me, actually. You hit on something. I feel like part of the struggle people are going through, and part of why people think life sucks, and you hear all of these things about that, is because I think people are caught up in having control over things that they don't have control over. And I think for me, my philosophy is the only thing I absolutely do have control over is myself.
Yeah.
How I respond to things, the energy that I give off, how I make people feel, you know, that's the only thing I have control over. And once you focus and say, okay, I have control over it, now I'm going to intentionally, you know, use that and be loving. That's what my choice is. Not everybody's choice is that. But once you're in control and realize that that's what you have control over, everything else falls into place, right? Yeah. And I always tell people, the way to have control is to let it go, right? Just understand that you don't have control, and that will kind of make you feel like you're more in control, because you know that you don't have the control, if that makes any sense.
It does. I think what this saying is, you can't direct the wind, but you can change the direction of the sail.
There you know? Go. That's a great one. I love it. That's a great one. Awesome. And I see Tommy just signing on right at the end. We're signing off now, Tommy, but what's happening? Again, Eric, thanks so much. I'm going to put you in the room, and I'll talk to you in just a minute. I'm going to say goodbye to my crew, and I'll see you later, and we'll have you back soon.
Thank you very much.
Oh, wow. What an inspiring story, right? I mean, it's so, I feel so blessed to be able to talk to people of all sorts of situations, sharing their gifts, sharing their stories, sharing their human experience, right? I talk about that all the time, like we're all a puzzle piece, and we may not fit right next to this person, but they're part of the puzzle. They're over here in the puzzle, I'm over here. It's a big picture. We're all part of that puzzle, and we all kind of need to accept every other part of that puzzle to be a whole. So that's my parting words, I guess. And Ninja Kitty, thank you for always enjoying my show. Favorite time of the week I always look forward to. Me too. Thursday nights, I'm always like, oh my God, it's Thursday again. I got to do this. And then I'm so happy by the time I'm sitting in front of my computer ready to talk to my guests. So thank you, Eric Hurnyak, for being here. His LI Creative Vortex is on the bottom. I did put, let me see if I could put it here in the comments again. Yes, here's in the comments, just so you can click on it. It's easier than putting it on a scroll where you have to type it. But in the comments, there's a link to the 360 ride, Babs 360 ride, on the GBM research page. Go help Eric out. It's inspiring for what he's doing. Next week, I don't even know what's going on with the live stream of consciousness. Let's see what I got in my calendar. Do I have a guest lined up for next week? I do not. Next week is July 4th. I may take the week off. Actually, now that I'm looking at the calendar and I'm seeing that it's July 4th. So maybe I'll see you, maybe I won't. Oh, you know what I also forgot to say tonight, which I don't even mind that I forgot to say it, was that the presidential debate was going on tonight. And it was funny because Eric, earlier in the day, he's like, oh, there's not going to be a lot of people watching. They're going to be watching the presidential debate. And all I could think of was people who are interested in my show are not necessarily interested in the presidential debate. Which is good, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't be. If that's what you want to put your energy into, great. But if you were here and you put your energy into this, I thank you. Tell your friends, come on back. Let's have a party. Let's do this every week. It's the live stream of consciousness. Peace, folks.